Welcome to the 9th and final Meg Quigley Summer Series session of 2020. I'm Kristen Wolf-Jensen, founder and director of the Meg Quigley Vivaldi competition and host for today. Along with my colleagues on our all-volunteer team, we invite you to support our mission, which includes providing education and inspiration to aspiring young bassoonists through providing our rigorous competition and generous prize money. Please consider becoming a friend of MQVC at mqvc.org/donate. We are very grateful to Barton Kane for sponsoring today's session. Julie and David, we love you. I'm such a fan of Barton Kane and its excellent shirts that I decided to make my own in one of my favorite colors. Following today's session, please join us for a reception to socialize and offer us some feedback on the summer sessions and to brainstorm for our virtual symposium in January. A link to that hangout was sent with your registration confirmation email for this session and is also on our website. It'll be posted in the chat at the end of this session as well. In today's session, in our second half hour, we will be chatting with Robert Hatton about his poem Ghost Dance and the solo bassoon piece by Gebuhr that it inspired. In the first half hour of today's session, I will be speaking with composer Adolphus Hailstork about his bassoon set alongside bassoonist Nicolian Washington, who recorded bassoon set on his CD Legacy. Dr. Hailstork, Mr. Washington, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So great to see you. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Hailstork, and give us a little brief Reader's Digest biography of where you are now and how'd you get there?
Well, I am in Norfolk, Virginia. I am at the Old Dominion Old Dominion University. They just named the department a School of Music, the Dean's School of Music. And I've been here for 40 years. What am I talking about? I was at Norfolk State for 23 years, and then I came over to Old Dominion, same city, in 2000. And I've been here ever since, and almost time to finish up the teaching career, but never the composing career. So that's what I'm doing. And I wrote the piece that Nicolian recorded back in 1996. I checked the date on that. So good 24-year-old piece, and wonderful, wonderful performance. I just listened to it again. It's on YouTube for anybody who wants to hear it. And the sensitivity that went into that recording is amazing. I love it. So I just want to say that.
It is
That's me. Yeah.
Beautiful playing. So on that note, Nicolian, would you please introduce yourself and maybe tell us a bit about how you found the piece?
Nicolian Washington. I'm currently the executive director of the Community Music Center of Boston, but before that, I had a long career as a bassoonist. I still play a little bit, but nothing like what I was doing before. But yeah, when I got the job teaching bassoon at the University of Memphis, I knew that I wanted to record a CD of music by Black composers, and I didn't know how to start finding works by Black composers, so I kind of Googled back then. Actually, was it even Google back then? I think I went to Trevco and was looking for some things. I did kind of the regular bassoon search sort of thing, and ran across the Hailstork. And actually, it was after a while of looking for works, and I'd almost given up the idea of it being a research project and started thinking that maybe it's a commissioning project because maybe there are just no Black composers who've written for bassoon. But then I ran across the bassoon set, and that really kind of opened my eyes up to all this music that I was missing. And so on the CD, there was really only one commission on the CD because there was a work by, of course, Professor Hailstork, by William Grant Still. There were some songs, a piece by Ulysses Kay, who was a student of Hindemith, and also a piece by a composer named Ed Bland. And so I really kind of fell into the project in many ways. And it took me on this whole journey of like kind of rethinking my relationship to not only Western classical music, but also to the bassoon in particular.
Excellent. Dr. Hailstork, if you were to contextualize your 1996 bassoon set in the continuum of the development of your compositional style.
I'll tell you how it came about. There's an organization called the National Association of Negro Musicians. And each year, or when they had their convention, I don't know if it's yearly anymore, they would have young people play in a contest, and they would designate what instruments were going to be involved in that year's contest. Sometimes it was woodwinds, sometimes it was brass, sometimes organ, sometimes piano, sometimes voice. And a woman who was very instrumental in that organization in terms of gathering the repertoire. One of the requirements for the contest was that at least one piece had to be by an African-American composer. Since this is an African-American group and they wanted to, I happen to love that thought, and it has energized my writing in chamber works, especially for most of my career. And Geneva Southall was in charge of gathering the pieces together, especially the pieces by African-American composers. And one day at the convention, she asked me, she said, you know, Hailstork, you ought to write something for bassoon. We don't have anything by a Black composer for bassoon. And how about getting something together for us? And so it is dedicated to her. I mean, at least the program notes say that, say that she was instrumental in helping to produce this instrumental piece, and at least encouraging me to write it. So I went home, I wrote the piece and sent it to the group. And the rest is history. Eventually it got published, and then it had the remarkable good luck of being performed and recorded by Laconia, Washington. And it's one of my treasured recordings. Yeah. So that's how it came about in '96. Excellent.
And since you've rewritten it for the flute as well, right?
Yes, I did. It occurred to me that, just by a transposition and getting it up an octave or two, boom, we've got a possible flute piece. And lo and behold, it worked. It worked. And flutists have played it and are playing it as well as bassoonists. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a charming piece on either instrument. I just love it. And it's so idiomatic for the bassoon, I feel. Did you feel that way, Napoleon?
I really did. I really did. You know, Professor Hailstork speaks about my performance of it, but it was really it was what was already in the piece. And we as musicians, we all know that we're just trying to bring out what is in the music. It's all in there, and it's our job to like try to be able to see it. And I remember thinking that, and I don't know why this is the case, but there was something that was really meaningful about that work, it being written by a Black composer. Because again, it was the first one that I got. So I ordered it, and it was the first one that I started working on because I know I'm going to record this piece. And it was quite a bit easier for me to navigate it, just because it's hard for me to just assume that our cultural heritage is the same, but there was definitely something in it where I just felt I was connected to it. There was something in it that really actually spoke to me. And so it was not the same type of learning process as it typically had been for me, because there were just some things in it. The third movement, the lento teneramente, there's something in that movement that I really connected with. And it wasn't like it was compositionally, it wasn't like, the composition of it was, oh, wow, these are harmonic things I've never heard of before. I mean, it was pretty straightforward, but there was just something inside that really, really spoke to me. I played that movement probably more than I played anything in the in the piece, because there was something in it that really spoke to me. And when I performed it, I felt like I was speaking as me when I performed that work. And a piece that I loved to perform was the Mozart bassoon concerto. The slow movement of that was a piece that I also loved, and also spoke to me. It was something that just kind of laid well for the way that I thought about music making. And this piece was also like that. It just laid well in the way that I thought about music. So it wasn't just me performing the work, it was performing something that was meaningful to me. And so that was a different frame in it. And also the fact that no one had written it, I didn't feel I was kind of restricted by these, cultural, societal norms of how the piece was played. So I was actually able to bring my own identity, my own character, my own self into that performance of that work, because a lot of the things, the rubato, things like that, they're of course not written in. It was really just an opportunity for me to be able to express myself as a musician. And it was really nice. It was really nice not to have the restrictions of playing this traditional rep where everyone's like, oh, you're doing it the Garfield way. And oh, this is from the Tuneman recording. And ooh, I didn't have to.
Now they're all going to do it your way.
Right. And that becomes the way. So now everyone's like, oh, you've listened to the Lacolian recording.
Right.
This is different than the Lacolian recording of that. And that was really, I really wanted to be in that space, because I wanted to feel like an artist. And being able to create that interpretation of those works really made me feel more like an artist rather than trying to recreate someone else's interpretation of the music.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
Lovely. And you did. You made the definitive recording of this.
You did. That's the word I was looking for, definitive recording.
It's so beautiful. And yet I would think within the style, as we encourage our future competitors in the Meg Quigley Vivaldi competition to explore this piece, I'm thinking there is a lot of freedom in terms of rubato, and the second movement seems very Bach-like. And maybe there are choices of how long you play those 16th notes in terms of articulation.
Yeah.
Unless, am I speaking the truth, Dr. Hailstork?
Oh, absolutely. The lingering on the high E before it's cascading down that scale, that blows me away all the time. I love that. There's such a sensitivity. It's not, maybe because I really relate to the performance, because it's the way it's more than I could ever expect. I mean, I just said, well, someone might play it. It's supposed to be a student piece for students, and I didn't expect anything as artistic as it turned out. And then that the rubato touches were splendid. So you nailed it. That's all I can say. He nailed it, folks, whoever's out there.
And I would say that if I can be honest, the second movement, there's no edits in that one. So that was one take.
One take.
Yeah. Because when we went back into the booth, actually we took some other takes, but we used the first take.
Right. Nailed it.
We're like, I think I got that one. That was kind of the way that we wanted to do it. I remember when I was working with the engineer, we worked with some of the other takes. We were like, oh, maybe it's this. And then we were like, we're actually taking splices and making them like the first take. So why don't we just use the first take? And that ended up being the one that was that's on that recording. It was one take. Yeah. And the first one. Yeah.
Hey, Dave, would you be able to play part of the second movement? And if you're not queued up to that, we'll start with the first.
Oh, bravo.
Wow, that is so cool. So playful and whimsical and technically nailed it.
Yeah, that actually, Kristen, I will, you know, that last A, just being able to just go, wow. That's a Jensen. That's a Kristen Jensen. I learned that was one of those things I learned from Kristen, which is go rah. You know, so don't worry about like trying to be, you know, make everything so round. If you're playing, so every once in a while you have to just open up your chest a little bit. Just go rah. And that was as I listened to that, I was like, oh wow, I learned that one from Kristen. That was definitely a Jensenism for me. So thank you for that.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yes. So Dr. Hailstork, and we might have time to listen to another movement or part of this and that, but would you say, and you've been commissioned by major orchestras and which is amazing. So how does this is very tonal style? Is
That's me.
that's you?
Yeah. Yeah. See, I came up, a lot of my generation were piano players, and you know, they're just, you know, what you can do with the piano, hopping all around and all that stuff and crunching, that's fine, and I've done it myself in my writing. But I came up primarily as a singer. I played violin at first, and I was a singer, and so I write very lyrically. Lyrical writing is a natural for me, and of course, when my voice, I sang in a. I always tell everybody this. I sang in a cathedral choir as a boy soprano, an English cathedral choir, English style, and in Albany, New York, and that when my voice changed, of course, I became a baritone, and lo and behold, my favorite instruments are right for bassoon and cello, and because you know that's where my voice changed into a baritone. So that and of course I write lyrically because as I said, I write a lot of choral music and a lot of songs. Good songs. So it was just writing for bassoon. It was actually a wonderful opportunity to. It's the only piece I've written for low woodwind, and it was a wonderful opportunity to just let loose. And I knew the instrument was agile. I mean, and it had a wide range, and I love both those things also in the cello. And so never just occurred to me, why did you ever think of doing it for cello? Well, you know, I have to change the keys, so we'll have to get those low B naturals out of there. But that's what I brought to it, and that's what I think Lekolian brought to it in his performance. Not saying that he was trying to sound like a string player, but the same sensitivity, the same that string players are always getting patted on the back for, can be brought out in this wonderful bassoon. And I was just trying to do a lyrical piece for a low instrument, and that's what happened. Yeah.
And now that you say you were a singer as a child, I think that's part of what we hear and what we love about your style and that third movement that Lekolian felt so connected to. Dave, would you be able to play a little bit of the third movement? Thank you. Ah, such beautiful music, so beautifully played. Really,
Beautifully played. I mean, the little diminuendos on B flat. I mean, you made the instrument sing, and it's just beautiful to listen to. It's what, you know, I find artists, and that's both of you, would do. That you to put that much nuance into it. You know, I served for years as a choir conductor also, and I would always be telling my singers, I want you to nuance this, put a little diminuendo, a little decay on that note, I'll put a little, save room for a little crescendo there, etc. That sensitivity of into that writing. I mean, and the playing is what got me. You got what I wrote. That's what I'm trying to say. I get carried away sometimes. Especially when I hear a piece played that well. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that there was so much in it. Felt like there was so much in between all of the various notes. So trying to get the connectivity was actually a bit of a chore. You know, just from the support and making sure that everything was okay here. You know, it moves around, it jumps around a little bit, goes over the break a bunch. And so you're like just trying to like keep everything all together. But the big thing about this one was really trying to, because you have these repetitions, really trying to find ways to make them sound different. Right. And so thinking about dynamics and vibrato, you know, we're thinking about what vibrato are you using at which dynamic? Is that going to be the thing that makes it different? That was part of the really, for me, the thinking in there was really thinking about how was I using my vibrato? How was I using dynamics? And what was like kind of the interplay between them along with what was happening harmonically. I love that the grace note at the beginning, the change is the B natural there, and then the B flat, it resolves there. That was, when I played it the first time, I was like, I'm going to spend some time with that one. You know, when I started learning this, I'm going to figure out how I really want to do that. Same thing at the end, at the very end of it, it's this long passage where there really isn't a great place to take a breath. And so you kind of have to do as much of it as possible in one breath, and then being able to hold the last G long enough to have its full length. That was also a little bit of a challenge, especially for me in live performance. But it was also something I remember. You know, anytime you're playing a piece, you know, you have these 3 or 4 things that you're really focusing on. That you know that these 3 or 4 moments really make this piece work. And so those were some moments in which I actually spent some time really trying to think about how I wanted to just kind of do that, because those were some of the moments that made it work for me anyway.
Yeah.
It's those special vocal nuances that make it an
That's it. Yes. Right? Yes, you nailed it. Exactly. The vocal nuances of this playing in that piece. Yeah.
Well, those years of me singing in a funk band. I used to sing in a funk band, and
oh yeah,
I used to sing in. I would just sing in like cover bands and things like that in grad school, and even after a little bit, it was something that I did. So yeah, I guess I could see. And also, I sang in college when I was at University of Texas. You know, I was in Longhorn Singers when I was there, and so I did do a little bit of singing. I'd never thought about the relationship between that and the way that I approached playing the bassoon. But now that I'm hearing you kind of centering on that, maybe that was the part of you that I was connecting to, was the part of you that did this vocal writing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Dr. Hailstork, we have in the chat, people are calling for you to write more bassoon music. We wanted to a sonata would be great. Are you writing that for us?
Okay, well,
I'll to get IDRS to commission. Well, they should get IDRS to commission a work. The International Double Reach.
There you go. He said the magic word there.
I know I did. That's right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been amazing. We need to wrap it up in like 1 minute. Do either of you have anything to add to this invigorating conversation?
I just am curious about how you or the teacher, I mean, well, you guys must have been the same age when you started teaching, right? When you taught him, were you just 2 years older than he was, or 2 years younger, or 10 years younger, or whatever?
Fewer than 10.
Huh?
Fewer than 10, I think. Probably fewer than 10 years older than me at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
9, I think.
That's amazing. It's amazing that, you know.
Actually, Kristen,
I'm very, very happy that you said that you would look at the piece and consider playing it yourself. And that's very, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's become very popular. I know Sue Heinemann, principal bassoon of the National Symphony, did it on a recital
Really?
about 6 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah, she was really drawn to the piece. And now we're going to have many dozens of competitors playing. And so we're really excited. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I'm glad.
and Kristen, I have just one closing point, if you don't mind. I'll keep it very brief. And my only point is, I performed that work in 2007. It was 11 years old. What I hear, 96. I performed it 10 years, and the bassoon world didn't recognize it until 10 years after that or more. And so if I was to charge all the bassoonists on the participants here, is that there is a lot of music out there by composers like Professor Hailstork and other people of color that are not being performed by all of us. And I would say, well, I don't play as much anymore, so now I'll blame you by all of you that are not being played by all of you, and they're just sitting on a shelf waiting for someone to love them. And so I'm hoping that that all of you will not only find the works that I found, because those are works that I loved, but I'm hoping that the rest of you will look for other works. Like Jeff Scott wrote a piece that Monica Ellis has performed, and there are these works that are out there that I'm hoping that more of you will do that, and I'm hoping that more of you will commission works by composers of color and by women composers. There are some really great composers out there, and they have beautiful music to share with the world, and they're just waiting for you to ask for it. And so I would hope that you all will consider this a call to action to do that.
Absolutely. There are some real gems out there already that need to be found and celebrated, and more to come with commissions, we hope.
Nice.
Thank you both. What a brilliant performance and collaboration on this great piece. Thank you so much for being here.
I love wind instruments. I've written a lot of music for flute, and I've got clarinet pieces out there also. And this is my one bassoon piece, except for that, let's see, what is it? I forgot. I already mentioned a transcription.
You had a trombone, right?
Yeah. You know, there are works out there. I hope you look me up, folks. Thank you.
I think you gained some fans today, Dr. Hailstork. Thank you. And
Thank
Nicole already had the whole bassoon community behind him, but
Okay.
thank you both.
Yeah. Hope to be in touch with you again. Both of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Okay.
Bye. Wonderful. And now I'd like to welcome my dear colleague, Dr. Robert Hatton, who is a professor of music theory at the University of Texas at Austin. And he is the poet as well of Ghost Dance, which was the poem that inspired his friend, and now my friend, Anne Gebuhr, to write a solo bassoon piece of the same name. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Kristen. And thanks to what we've just heard, this lovely bassoon set. It was very inspiring.
So tell us a bit about your poem and when and why you wrote it, and then how that led into Anne writing Ghost Dance for solo bassoon.
Well, Anne and I have known each other for our whole careers. We were doctoral students together at Indiana University way back in the 70s, or early 80s, I should say. No, late 70s, early 80s. And I wrote 2 libretti for her for operas that were performed in Houston. So we had this connection already. And I wrote this poem inspired by, as we'll see, a book on the Ghost Dance. Anne came across it when I sent it to her and was so inspired by it, and we'll see her story in a minute as well. But maybe I should tell you a little bit about my dear colleague, Dr. Professor Anne Gebuhr. She, besides the two operas I just mentioned, she's had a commissioned work of a cantata for the peace window at the Thomaskirche in Leipzig, the church where Bach is buried. And she's also written a wonderful book on the music and spiritual practices of Hildegard of Bingen. And another connection we have as music theorists is that she was the first to write a scholarly thesis on the music of Penderecki. And since then, we have both written joint articles on Penderecki, who just died last spring. So lots of connections here, and maybe we could go then to the slides and we'll get into the meat of the matter.
Yeah, so we have a nice presentation here, kind of working out the philosophy behind Ghost Dance and the beautiful poem, and alternating with some music.
The original poem, Ghost Dance, was inspired by reading Black Elk Speaks, the memories of an Oglala Lakota medicine man told through and translated into English by his son while being transcribed at the same time and subsequently edited by John G. Neihart. Black Elk had participated in the Ghost Dance and was a survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Wounded Knee Massacre. The poem, of course, inspired the composition for solo bassoon entitled Ghost Dance by Dr. Anne K. Gebuhr of Houston, Texas. So Anne speaks. She was not able to join us today because of health reasons, but she sent me these wonderful notes that I will read for her. Living in Aberdeen, South Dakota, while teaching at Northern State University for 7 years, I witnessed profound verbal and cultural acts of hatred and abuse against the members of the Oglala Sioux. Experiencing Robert's poem less than 10 years after leaving South Dakota brought back deep memories of the situation there, especially of the difficulties and deaths on the Pine Ridge Reservation in the early 1970s. Ghost Dance emerged from the depths of those emotions and memories and the knowledge that the bigotry, hatred, and abuse still continue. I chose the bassoon for its wonderful color and also for its visual properties. It is figuratively rather like a large peace pipe, isn't it? But it creates beauty and depth of emotion and meaning through evocative sounds instead of sacred smoke. The Native American Ghost Dance is a ceremony for the regeneration of the earth and the restoration of the earth's caretakers to their former life. The religion experienced its height of practice during the late 19th century when devastation to the buffalo, to the land, and to its Native American guardians was at its peak. Beautiful, Kristen. I should mention that Kristen made this wonderful video, and what you're hearing and seeing are excerpts from the video. So interpreting the poem, here's the opening in the first stanza. It's what you dream when your culture is denatured. The return one thunderous afternoon of buffalo, deer, elk, pondering the red clay into ancestral smoke. In this poem, I imagine the Ghost Dance as a dream. in which the natural world in which their culture was based has been taken away. And they imagine tragically that it can mystically reappear through their ritualized movements. The imagery involves words with multiple meanings. Thunderous, as both associated with thunder and the hope of rain, and the thundering of hooves. Pondering, as both reflecting upon and as an echo of those hooves pounding the ground. Imagined as the red clay from which they fashioned their ceremonial pipes. The red symbolizing the blood of the ancestors, hence ancestral smoke. So Anne, continuing with the historical background, the ghost dance affected no group more than the Lakota Sioux. Several Lakota bands sent emissaries to interview its high priest, Wovoka, about his teachings, and they reported in early 1890 Wovoka's message that performing the ghost dance would bring back dead Indians, return plentiful buffalo herds, and induce a natural disaster that would sweep away the foreigners, thus restoring the Indian way of life that had existed prior to European contact. Remembrance, throbbing before the bloodshot eye, captures the burden of rain dance, though it loosen not one tear from the vacant sky. This stanza speaks to the frustration of the dream, as allegorized by a failed rain dance. Here, burden also echoes the Old English word for a refrain, burthen, implying the ritualized song that fails in this case to achieve its intended result. So as Anne continues, the dancers wore special long shirts painted with figures and patterns outlined in a crimson red color. The dances were plaintive, calling forth the spirits of dead warriors and leaders, remembering their care and leadership, and asking for a return of their culture and life. It was not an incitement to war or violence, but more a passionate plea for freedom and a return to their lands and life. The treaties intended to bring peace were often ignored. The tribes had been rounded up and herded onto reservations, usually the poorest land in the territory. And then they were subjected to near prison camp-like regulations and restrictions. Their requests were largely ignored or refused. So the last stanza. Crazed with wrinkles, the old people awaken and stagger in buckskin among the white hills of a late winter camp. This final stanza focuses on the moment when the elders awaken, staggered by their late recognition of hopelessness Here, crazed does not literally mean crazy, but rather dazed. I chose this form of the word because it calls forth a specialized meaning, referring to those spidery cracks that you often see in a ceramic glaze. The white hills of winter also suggest a negation of the sacred black hills. By employing suggestive imagery rather than direct narrative in this poem, I enable the listener to imagine and experience the emotional power of a tragedy that is beyond verbal description. So Anne continues. Although practiced by a Lakota tribe in Canada until the 1960s and revived briefly in South Dakota in the 1970s, ghost dance practices were ended in 1890 by the U.S. 7th Cavalry at the Wounded Knee Massacre of 297 Lakota men, women, and children during the dance ceremony. Unfortunately, today there are still the remains of those types of treatment, the Dakota pipeline invasion, and the use and destruction of Native American lands that were granted through treaties, which are now inconvenient. Beyond that barely acknowledged unjust activity, the bigotry, racial hatred, and unconstitutional treatment of Native Americans continues to this day. I don't wish to make bringing this ghost dance to life a political event, but its cause, nature, and history are still very much alive. Robert's poem conveys some of the deep imagery of the Lakota experience, and its expression carries a still living message. After experiencing a powerful response to the poem, it took some time to conceive of a sound environment that could evoke its intent. The bassoon, a single bassoon was the choice. Its timbral capabilities, its range, its wonderful melodic and dynamic capabilities, and I must admit, the aforementioned character of being a pipe. Musically, the wide leaps, extreme registers, and non-metered movement represent the incredible and to date unsolvable stress and strain of a forced alien lifestyle. Theft of families and lands, poverty, health, and total disregard of human rights. The special effect is a way of creating time to experience reflectively the emptiness of the great prairie with a cold, snowy, and plaintive wind. The last note is a wordless question.
I find this piece so moving and the poem so heart-wrenchingly moving. And yes, a wordless question. The last note leaves that feeling in us, as does the whole situation in our country. Thank you, Robert, for this, your beautiful poetry, and thank you for sharing the piece with me. I think we were in a committee meeting one day and you said, oh, my friend has a piece, I'll put it in your mailbox. And a couple days later, it was in my mailbox. I took it home and read it and was blown away with its power and its beauty, and was determined at that point to play it. Thank you so much. There's so much.
It's an extraordinary performance, and it's so moving. And Anne and I are so grateful, just as we saw with Professor Hailstork's piece, the importance of the performer with Lacolian's wonderful, beautiful recording of that piece. It just doesn't happen unless it's brought to life by a performer who understands and can relate to and convey, transfigure those marks on the page into meaningful sound. And we really appreciate that creative mediation that you offer to the creative works.
Thank you so much. It takes both of us, right? I'm so grateful for having your artistry and the composer's artistry. Thank you, Anne Gebuhr. I hope you're listening. She's such a lovely person. I wish she could have joined us today, but she did through her words.
Yes.
And you know, this is being our last summer series. It's ending on kind of a heavy note, but I hope this is a call to everybody to use our art to make the world a better place, and to figure out ways to have positive impact through our humanity and what we can say with our artistry.
Well said. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Robert. And to our general audience, do we have any questions, Jessica, for Robert or for me about the performance? Or we could probably kind of answer what Anne might be thinking. I'm not getting any questions from Jessica. So do you have anything to add, Robert?
That it's been a wonderful experience to come back to the poem, first when Anne wrote the piece, then again when you championed it. And I actually read the poem before your performance in Houston, and another person read it at a couple of other places, including at the Double Reed Society, I believe.
Right.
And then finally coming together a fourth time when you put the video together, which, is it still available on YouTube?
Yes, it's up there.
I think that would be a wonderful model for students who want to learn the piece.
I hope so. Yeah, it's a real masterwork. I'm so grateful that it popped into my mailbox one day.
And each time you return to a piece or a poem or a creative act of any sort and revitalize it through performance or through reconsideration and reflection upon it, it grows.
Right.
Pieces are not static. We keep bringing to them a deepness of heart and conviction, or as was stated in the earlier session, this notion that there are certain moments that you feel is so deeply a part of, that's what makes the piece work. Mm-hmm. And were there moments like that for you in this piece?
Oh, absolutely. Just, you know, and the poem kind of sets me in a mood that, and she wrote in a classical sense a lot of appoggiaturas that just seem so pulling at the heartstrings, you know, yeah, kind of a resolution to dealing with a really sorrowful situation. But yeah, every time I come back to it, there's something new to dig out of the emotion.
It really touched her. I did not realize when I shared the poem with her that she had had these experiences in South Dakota. And so it truly resonated with her, went very deeply to some of her earliest experiences
Right.
as a teacher. And such an important thing to reach out with this kind of deep empathy. That is what the artist tries to do, to become a part of another culture in this case.
Right.
And of course, I cannot speak for the Lakota Sioux. I can only speak to my empathy towards suffering, empathy towards the mode of expression, and empathy towards how one visualizes in an art form that better world that may be lost forever, but still could be recreated in the imagination. William Butler Yeats said that Ireland hurt him into poetry. And sometimes out of that suffering comes the most beautiful reconciliation.
That's a really beautiful sentiment. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned how you can't speak for the Lakota Sioux. Much of our audience is familiar with Jackie Wilson, who read the poem for me at the International Double Read Society last summer. And she has Native American heritage. And I asked her beforehand, do you consider this appropriation? Please tell me. And she said, no, this does come across as an honoring of the people, and in Anne's words, it is a lament in empathy for them. So,
right. Yes, we did not, well, at least in the poem, I did not consciously try to borrow or use any particular Native American mode of poetry or discourse, with which I was not that familiar, but rather to use a language that I could understand and be expressive within. And rather than trying to tell a story, to show a feeling, which is difficult, I think, to do. But it leaves then the completion for the composer, for the reader, for the listener, to experience more deeply as a kind of meditation as well as a lament, a means of reflecting upon that which we feel most deeply.
beautiful. Again, the poem and this piece are some of my favorite means I've found in my entire career for doing so. So thank you for sharing them with us, all of us.
A wonderful collaboration, and today as well.
Yes, thank you, Robert. And to our audience, please join us at our reception. That is in a link, hopefully in our chat over here, but it should also be in your email that confirmed your registration for this session. And we hope to see you there to just chat and maybe get some feedback on the summer session and enjoy each other's company. Thank you so much for joining us in this our first summer season, and see you on the next time.
Bye then.
Bye-bye.